Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. It's Hila here from Saturday Night Stitch, and I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are. Okay, so today's post, I have decided to show you what my sewing room looks like 99.9% of the time. So the other 0.1% is when I have just done a big monthly tidy up, but I can never keep my sewing room, my sewing studio looking like those perfect Pinterest style sewing studios. This is what I work in, day out, and so I just decided to share it with you. I had thought, I should wait until I have tidied it up because I've just moved my sewing room from a smaller space into this bigger attic space, and so this is what we have here. So we have a cutting table and the machines and the ironing board. Okay, so I'm gonna start in that corner over there because that's sort of the first section that I see when I walk in. I mean, literally it is a mess, guys, and it is kinda always like this for the most part. But I centered my main work area underneath the Villax window skylight because that's where I get the best natural light, which is in line with good ergonomic principles. So we have this extra large ironing board that I've had for about 18 months now, and I love how much it's got all of that extra space, and it's got all these bits and bobs underneath where I can hang little containers from IKEA. And I also like that it has this heat proof or heat reflective material. I don't know what it's called, but I try to protect it by placing another piece of fabric over it. And it also has a socket, an electric extension underneath so that you can plug your iron directly there. However, I don't actually do that. I have my iron plugged into an extension. So one thing that I discovered a couple of years ago that really improved my pressing game is this Teflon iron plate, and I bought that off of Amazon. And you just attach it. It's a universal one. It should fit most irons. You just attach it, and it means that you don't burn anything. However, I've been really bad about cleaning my iron, and I do need to give it some TLC and actually clean the sole plate, because what happens is if you're using tap water for your steam iron, all the chemicals, all the calcium, and all of the lime is going to build up on your sole plate. So you kind of need to make sure that you do clean it. But it does a really excellent job of not creating a shiny look on the surface of fabrics that you're ironing, and it does basically mean that it's like a buffer between the sole plate and the fabric, which is pretty fantastic. I highly recommend it. I've been using for a couple of years now. So another little organizational thing that I do is I put these little sticker tapes on the sockets so that I know which one is which, because sometimes I unplug things and I have to make sure I know what's going on. And so I also made my own silk organza pressing cloth. I highly recommend using an organza silk pressing cloth, especially if you're going to be working with wools or similar type fabrics. Okay, so this is the first of my machines, and it is my cover stitch machine, and it's the Fuff, how do you pronounce that? Fuff Coverlock 4.0. So you can actually convert this into an overlocker as well. And yeah, I like using it. I've so far figured out how to use the cover stitch, and I have been using it a bit more. Up next is my Brother 3034D overlocker. This machine is a workhorse. I do so much stuff with it. And you can see my cables haven't been tidied up and sorted out yet. Again, I've just recently moved into this attic space. It's been about 2 months now, so it does need some sorting out. We're moving into my main sewing area where my vintage machine is currently on the table. Now, guys, I am in love with this vintage sewing machine. It's very beautiful. What can I say about it? I mean, just look at it. Look at the sleek design lines, and it's those beautiful colors, the knobs, and I really love it. And it's very weird because I did not expect to love a vintage sewing machine at all, because I don't really like vintage sewing patterns. So I was like, oh, vintage sewing machine. But this does the most beautiful stitches ever and the best invisible zipper insertions. And yeah, so I use this most of the time. Actually, the only thing I don't use it for is for buttonholes. I cannot do without the one-step buttonholes, which I use with my other Husqvarna machine that I will show you. So we got some random stuff over here, and then tucked away we've got what I like to call my overflow overlocker, and that's for when I'm in a rush. I don't necessarily have time to change threads, but I need to use a lighter thread. I will use that JMB. I bought that off of Gumtree for only £35. And over here we have some fabric, some yarn, some toilet roll. Just ignore that. We'll quickly, very quickly, move on to showing you my storage space, which contains, only a little bit more fabric, nothing to worry about, just a little bit more fabric. And then over there we've got some sewing supplies, and we'll quickly, very quickly, move over to my so-called cutting table. I've never actually cut anything on this cutting table. As you can see, it is used for other stuff. I always stay hydrated, by the way, so I always make sure that I've got a large water bottle full of water to constantly drink when I am sewing. But that's my cutting table, which is a really nifty IKEA table. It is adjustable. I'm sure at some point I will cut on it. Who knows when? So just underneath, I've got this plastic 3-drawer storage caddy where I keep my interfacings in the 2 drawers, and then I've got some ribbing or cuffing material in the bottom drawer. I tend to collect it a lot more than I use it. So yeah, and you can see in the back there, that's where some of the fabric collection is, but not all of the boxes are fabric collection. Some of them are like, they are keepsakes and, pass it ons for the kids. Okay, so that's the adjustable table, and over here is my Husqvarna Viking sewing machine, and I mostly use this for like decorative stitches or for doing buttonholes. But yeah, it's been usurped by the vintage sewing machine because this is what I used to use before, until I started using my vintage sewing machine. But it's a good little machine, especially for beginners or intermediates, because it's got a nice range of decorative stitches, and it's also got a variable speed, and you can use a foot pedal with it, or you don't use a foot pedal if you can. I've never figured out how to sew without using a foot pedal. I find it hard to do that, but I like the flexibility that this offers. And it also came with an extension table, which I use when I'm sewing, because having that extra space makes it easier for me to feed the cloth through the feed dogs. For ergonomic sewing, I got this tilt table, and it's also a Husqvarna tilt table. I picked this up off of eBay, but basically it puts your sewing machine at a slight angle, and that improves your posture because you can see your stitch plate a lot easier, and that made a huge difference when I was using the Husqvarna. Unfortunately, I can't use that with the vintage sewing machine, and that's something that I need to figure out. Okay, so that's my floor there with all of the threads and all of the bits and bobs, and there's tons of pins in that carpet. Honestly, so many pins get picked up by the vacuum cleaner. I need to figure out a way of getting pins off the floor before they get into my vacuum cleaner. But I just wanted to quickly show you the baby sewing machine that we have. A couple of years ago, I bought this John Lewis baby sewing machine for my son, who's basically been sewing since he was about 3 or 4 years old. But he doesn't actually use this because it's actually too much of a baby machine, so he actually uses the Husqvarna. We're currently trying to sell it off because nobody likes using it because it's too much of a baby. So what's in my sewing drawers? Yeah, whoop whoop. So we got bobbin cases, which I love. I didn't discover these until about 3 years ago, and I was like, seriously, why did I not use this? But I find them very useful. So there are my zips in random orders, just a drawer. I honestly have no idea what is in this drawer for the most part, except for I did remember that it does have a French curve, which I use for pattern drafting, which I am doing a lot more of this year. And that's my buttons drawer. I've given up trying to organize this because my twins love this drawer so much. They're constantly always undoing any organizational stuff I do with the buttons. This, it's like a miscellaneous drawer with just stuff and more stuff. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what organizational category that falls into. This again is just got some more random stuff to do with sewing. Yeah. And then this one has got my embroidery threads from when I went through a phase where I thought I had the patience to do embroidery. Turns out it's not for me. And I also have my Petersham ribbon, which I'm incredibly passionate about. So I bought a 40-meter roll of Petersham ribbon. That's my elastics drawer, which also has some of my bias binding. The trims are in this drawer. Yeah, it's just random lengths of trims that I picked up from cardboard sales, charity shops, and various sales. And this last drawer here contains all of my threads. So I basically have just about every color thread I can think of. But those are my drawers, which for the most part seem quite disorganized, but I know where everything is. And even though my sewing room / sewing cave looks very scruffy and very untidy, this is when I am at my most creative. And in fact, the only time that my sewing room was ever incredibly tidy and perfect was when I was having mental health issues and I didn't have any sewing mojo and I just wasn't experiencing joy and positivity in life. So when I see my sewing room looking that crazy, it tells me that I am experiencing surges of creativity. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope that you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, do give it a big thumbs up down below. If you haven't already, do subscribe for new sewing related videos every single week. And until I see you next time, happy sewing. Bye.